The crowd roared as the bass shook the floor of the packed arena. Cell phones lit up the darkness, recording every word, every move, every heartbeat of the man they adored. Marcus Johnson, better known by his stage name, Lyric, strutted across the stage in a diamond-studded jacket that shimmered under the spotlights. To his fans, he wasn't just a rapper. He was untouchable, a voice of the streets who had risen from nothing to dominate the charts. But behind the flashing lights and the deafening applause, Marcus carried a secret. Fame had made him powerful, rich, and admired by millions, yet it had also made him reckless. He lived on the edge, chasing thrills as if nothing could ever bring him down. The son of a struggling single mother, Marcus had clawed his way out of poverty with nothing but a notebook of rhymes and a hunger to be remembered. Those who knew him back then would say, Lyric always had fire in his words. He knew he was destined for something bigger. They weren't wrong. His debut album went platinum. His face covered billboards. He performed on late-night shows and walked red carpets with actors and athletes. He was living the American dream. But Marcus also believed in something dangerous, that loyalty was flexible and rules were meant to be broken. In his inner circle, one man had always stood out. Derek Carter. Not just a friend, but a brother in all but blood. Long before Marcus was Lyric, Derek was there, producing beats in his basement, hustling to book studio time, encouraging him when no one else believed. Derek wasn't flashy. He wasn't interested in the spotlight. He was the steady hand, the grounded family man who wanted nothing more than a simple life with his wife, Samantha, and the promise of stability. Their friendship was legendary. Interviews, old photos, even documentary clips showed Marcus with an arm around Derek, bragging, "This man right here? I wouldn't be where I am without him." Fans loved the bond, the rapper and the producer, two kids who beat the odds together. Yet somewhere between the flashing lights and late-night parties, the cracks began to show. Samantha Carter, Derek's wife, was a quiet, graceful woman. To the public eye, she was the picture of devotion, always supporting Derek, never seeking attention. But Marcus noticed her in a way he shouldn't have. At first, it was small, compliments that lingered a little too long, glances exchanged when Derek wasn't looking. She laughed at his jokes, and he felt the spark. And Marcus, accustomed to getting everything he wanted, convinced himself this wouldn't be any different. He once whispered to a friend backstage, "I built my empire. Nothing's off limits to me. Not money, not fame, not even love." The seeds of tragedy were being sown, though no one in the screaming arena that night could see it. They only saw Lyric, the superstar who seemed larger than life. They didn't see the man who was about to risk everything, his career, his friendship, and his very life, for a secret passion that could never stay hidden forever. That night, as the concert ended and Marcus basked in the roar of his fans, Derek stood at the side of the stage, proud as always, unaware of the storm that was coming. Narrators of true crime stories often say the same thing. The higher the rise, the harder the fall. And Marcus Johnson, the boy who had once dreamed of escaping the projects, was about to learn just how far and how fast a man can fall when betrayal comes from the very people he trusts most. After the concerts ended, after the champagne toasts and backstage photo ops, life slowed down into quieter moments where temptation had space to grow. It always started innocently. That's how sins usually do. Marcus would stop by Derek's house on late afternoons, sometimes to review beats, sometimes just to grab a meal. Samantha would be there, moving through the kitchen with effortless grace, serving plates of food, while Derek flipped through soundboards in the other room. At first, Marcus admired her silently. She had a presence that was different from the women who threw themselves at him on tour. She wasn't chasing fame or money. She looked him in the eyes when she spoke. She asked about his health, about his mother, about how he was holding up with the chaos of fame. And for a man who lived in a world of shallow praise and fake friends, that kind of attention felt like oxygen. One evening, when Derek was away for business, Marcus showed up unannounced with an excuse about dropping off a new track. Samantha opened the door, surprised, a little wary. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if someone might catch them. Marcus leaned casually against the doorframe, flashing that smile fans across America adored. "I just wanted to see you. Derek will never know." Her breath caught. "Marcus, this is crazy. You're his best friend. And you're his wife," Marcus replied softly. But when I'm around you, I don't feel like Lyric, the superstar. I feel like Marcus, just a man who sees a woman he can't get out of his head." Samantha shook her head, torn between fear and the pull of his words. She wanted to close the door, to send him away, but she didn't. Instead, she stepped aside. And in that single choice, the line was crossed. From then on, what began as stolen glances became stolen hours. They justified it to themselves. Derek was always busy. Derek would never understand her loneliness. Marcus was just filling the silence. But the truth was simpler and darker. Passion had swallowed reason. Late-night drives, hushed phone calls, hotel rooms booked under false names. The affair had its rhythm. Marcus, who thrived on risk, reveled in the secrecy. Samantha, who had once sworn she'd never betray her vows, found herself craving the attention, the fire she thought her marriage had lost. Yet, in the back of their minds, both knew they were playing with fire. One night, after leaving Marcus's penthouse, Samantha lingered at the door. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her coat. "This is wrong," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. "If Derek finds out." Marcus pulled her close, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "He won't. Trust me. No one will ever know. This stays between us." But the arrogance in his voice, the certainty that he could control every outcome, was the very flaw that had driven his entire career. Marcus believed he was invincible. He believed fame made him untouchable, even in matters of the heart. What he didn't see, what neither of them saw, was that betrayal has a way of leaving shadows. A forgotten text, a familiar cologne, a slip of the tongue, those shadows always find the light. And while Marcus wrapped his arms around Samantha, savoring the thrill of the forbidden, Derek was already beginning to sense that something in his perfect world was shifting. A marriage once steady now felt hollow. A friendship once unbreakable now felt fragile. The stage lights might have gone out after each show, but in the quiet corners of life, the true drama had only just begun. Derek Carter was a man who trusted easily. He had to. Trust was the foundation of his marriage, his career, his friendship with Marcus. For years, he never questioned his wife's loyalty or his friend's integrity. But betrayal always leaves tiny cracks before it explodes. And Derek was beginning to notice them. It started with the small things. Samantha's laugh sounded different, almost nervous, whenever Marcus stopped by. She looked away too quickly, avoided lingering in the same room. Marcus, once open and relaxed around Derek, now seemed oddly stiff, his eyes darting, his words sometimes cut short. Derek told himself he was imagining it. Stress, exhaustion. Life on the road had a way of making everyone edgy. But then came the little slip-ups. A perfume he didn't recognize lingering on Marcus's jacket. A late-night call Samantha claimed was from her sister, though Derek knew her sister never called at midnight. He caught her once, quickly shoving her phone under a pillow as he walked into the bedroom. When he asked, she smiled too quickly and said, "Oh, it was nothing." At first, Derek tried to push the doubts away. He was no fool, but he wanted to believe. After all, Marcus had been like a brother since they were kids. Samantha was the woman he'd promised forever to. If he couldn't trust them, who could he trust? But the gut never lies. And Derek's gut was screaming louder with each passing day. One evening, he sat alone in the studio, staring at the mixing board. The music that usually flowed through him felt dead. He picked up his phone, scrolled through old photos of him and Marcus, teenagers rapping in a garage, standing shoulder to shoulder in dingy clubs, celebrating their first platinum record together. Then photos of him and Samantha, their wedding day, her radiant smile, the promise in her eyes. He felt a heaviness in his chest, a question he couldn't escape. What if the two people I love most are betraying me? He brought it up to an old friend over a quiet drink. His voice shook as he spoke. Do you ever feel like you're being played for a fool?" His friend frowned. "What are you talking about?" "Marcus. Sam. Something feels off. I can't explain it, but," he paused, fighting the lump in his throat. "I think they're hiding something from me." His friend hesitated before answering, careful with his words. "Derek, sometimes when you feel it here," he tapped his chest, "you're not wrong." That night, Derek lay awake in bed beside Samantha. She slept peacefully, her breathing even, her hand resting on the pillow where her phone once hid. He stared at the ceiling, his heart pounding. The suspicion was no longer just whispers in his mind. It had become a roar. The next morning, He watched her get dressed. She avoided his eyes as she slipped on her earrings. He asked casually, "You seeing your sister again tonight?" She froze for the briefest second before nodding. "Yes." "What?" "No reason," he replied, though his jaw tightened. It was in that pause, that half-beat of hesitation, that Derek knew something wasn't right. The trust that had carried him through years of marriage and friendship was beginning to crumble. And once trust cracks, it never returns whole. He didn't have the evidence yet, but his instincts told him the truth was close, and when it surfaced, it would destroy everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and the people he held dearest. For weeks, Derek lived in a fog. His body moved through the motions, producing beats, answering calls, sitting at dinners, but his mind was consumed by a single tormenting thought. Was his wife lying to him? Was his best friend betraying him behind his back? He didn't want to believe it. God knows he tried. But every smile from Samantha felt rehearsed. Every glance from Marcus felt loaded. Trust, once so natural, had curdled into poison. One evening, Derek returned home earlier than expected from the studio. The house was quiet, too quiet. He called out, "Sam?" No answer. He walked down the hall, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Then he saw it. Marcus's jacket draped carelessly over the chair in their bedroom. A jacket he recognized instantly, the one Marcus wore on stage just last week. His chest tightened. He stood frozen, staring at it, until Samantha stepped out from the bathroom. She gasped when she saw him. "Derek, you're home early." He gestured toward the jacket, his voice low, trembling with restrained rage. "Why is his coat here?" She faltered, fumbling for words. He stopped by. He wanted your opinion on a new track. He must have left it." Derek cut her off, his eyes blazing. "Don't lie to me, Sam." Tears welled in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the silence that followed was louder than any confession. That silence broke something in him. That night, Derek left the house without another word. He drove aimlessly through the city, neon lights blurring past as anger boiled in his veins. Memories of childhood with Marcus flashed in his mind. Two boys with big dreams, sharing headphones, promising to make it out together. Then his wedding day with Samantha, her hand trembling in his as she said, "I'll never betray you." And now this. He pulled over to the side of the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The betrayal was a double-edged sword, not just the woman he loved, but the brother he trusted. The next morning, Derek confronted Samantha in the kitchen. She was pouring coffee, her hands shaking slightly. "Tell me the truth," he demanded. Her eyes darted away. "Derek, please." "The truth, Sam." His voice cracked like a whip. Finally, she broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely. You were always gone, always busy. Marcus made me feel alive again." The words sliced through him. Alive again. With him. He slammed his hand against the table. "I gave you everything. And him? He's supposed to be my brother." Samantha sobbed, covering her face. "I never stopped loving you, Derek. But you weren't there. You don't understand how empty this house felt." He staggered back, shaking his head. "You don't fix loneliness by crawling into my best friend's bed." Her cries echoed through the kitchen, but Derek no longer heard them. The sound of betrayal was deafening, drowning out everything else. For days, Derek avoided Marcus. He ignored calls, skipped meetings, stayed away from the studio. But Marcus was never one to be ignored for long. Eventually, he showed up at Derek's house, knocking loudly until the door opened. Derek stood in the doorway, his jaw clenched. "You've got some nerve coming here." Marcus smirked, though unease flickered in his eyes. "Man, listen, things just happened. You can't blame me for what she wanted." Derek's fists clenched. "Don't you dare put this on her." Marcus shrugged, his arrogance boiling over. "She came to me, Derek. Maybe if you'd been taking care of her, she wouldn't have needed someone else." The words detonated inside Derek like dynamite. He lunged forward, shoving Marcus back against the wall. "You were my brother," he roared. "You slept with my wife and call it a mistake? You spit on everything we built together." Marcus shoved him off, his grin turning cold. "Brothers? Don't fool yourself. Out here, it's every man for himself. And I always get what I want." For a moment, the two men glared at each other, breathing hard, the air thick with fury. It was Samantha's scream from the top of the stairs that broke them apart. "Stop it. Please, stop," she cried, tears streaming down her face. Marcus straightened his jacket, shooting Derek a look that said everything. "I'm not sorry." Then he walked out the door. That night, Derek sat alone in the dark, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. His heart was a storm of rage, grief, and humiliation. He replayed Marcus's words again and again, each repetition cutting deeper. "Every man for himself. I always get what I want." The betrayal had ignited a fire inside Derek, a fire that wouldn't burn out. He realized then that nothing between them could ever be the same. The friendship was dead. The marriage was shattered. And his own soul felt poisoned. Staring at the gun he kept locked away in the drawer, Derek whispered to himself, "He took everything from me. Everything." The man who had once been gentle, loyal, and forgiving was gone. In his place stood someone hardened by betrayal, someone who could no longer tell the difference between justice and revenge. And though he didn't know it yet, the decision he would make in the days ahead would seal all of their fates. The night of the party was drenched in extravagance. Flashing lights bounced off luxury cars lined up outside a glittering Los Angeles venue. Industry elites, models, athletes, and hangers-on all filed inside, eager to be part of Marcus Lyric Johnson's afterparty. His latest single had just debuted at #1, and tonight was a celebration of power, fame, and victory. Inside, the bass thumped through the floor, champagne flowed like water, and laughter filled every corner. Marcus stood at the center of it all, basking in the glow, as if betrayal and broken friendships were the farthest thing from his mind. He wore a sharp, white blazer that practically screamed confidence, his diamond chain catching every glint of light. To the crowd, he was untouchable. But standing outside the venue, Derek Carter's world was anything but bright. His hand tightened around the steering wheel of his car, parked just down the street. His eyes were fixed on the building, rage boiling beneath his calm exterior. He hadn't wanted to come. He'd told himself to stay away, to let time bury the wounds. But the words Marcus had left him with, "I always get what I want," echoed in his head like a taunt. Tonight, he needed to confront him. Derek slipped the gun into his jacket, not with the intent to show it off, but with the grim knowledge that this confrontation could spiral out of control. He told himself it was for protection, but deep inside, he knew the truth. Rage had a way of making men do irreversible things. When he stepped inside, the room was awash with noise and lights. No one noticed him at first. He was just another face in the crowd. But his eyes locked instantly on Marcus, laughing with a circle of fans and industry friends, Samantha lingering just a few steps behind. Derek's chest tightened at the sight. His wife, standing there as if nothing had happened, as if the secret she shared with Marcus wasn't tearing his life apart. He moved through the crowd, every step heavy with fury. People turned, recognizing him, murmuring his name. Derek Carter, the producer, the man behind the music. But there was nothing celebratory in his expression. When Marcus saw him, his smile faltered for the briefest moment before returning, smug and cocky. "Derek," he called out, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "Glad you could make it, brother." "Brother." The word sliced through Derek like a blade. He stopped just a few feet away, his voice steady but dripping with venom. "Don't call me that. Not anymore." The crowd quieted, sensing tension. Samantha's eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. "Derek, please, this isn't the place." But Marcus wasn't backing down. He spread his arms dramatically, as if he were still performing on stage. "Look around you, man. This is success. This is what we built. And you're going to throw it all away over a woman." Derek's jaw clenched. "Not just any woman. My wife. My life. The vows we made. None of it meant a damn thing to you, did it?" The room grew colder, quieter, despite the thumping music in the background. Phones began to rise in the air, recording. Marcus smirked, his arrogance blazing. "She came to me. Maybe you weren't enough for her. Maybe you're not enough for anyone." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Samantha pressed her hands to her mouth, tears brimming. "Stop it, Marcus, please." But Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for Derek to hear. "Face it, you already lost." That was the moment the fire inside Derek ignited beyond control. He had come here to confront Marcus, maybe to demand an apology, maybe to make him understand the devastation he'd caused. But with those words, with that smirk, Marcus had pushed him past the edge of reason. The party, once a glittering celebration, had transformed into the setting of a tragedy waiting to unfold. And as Derek's hand brushed against the weight of the gun in his jacket, he realized the night would not end with words. The room had gone from electric to suffocating in a matter of seconds. What was once a celebration now felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Eyes shifted, whispers spread, and cell phones pointed like silent witnesses, recording every word. Derek stood stiff, his chest heaving as he stared at Marcus. The rapper still wore that same smug grin, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Samantha stood between them, trembling, her voice cracking. "Please, both of you, stop this before it goes too far." But Marcus wasn't done. He thrived on spectacle, and in his arrogance, he believed he was untouchable. He spread his arms wide as if he were on stage again, shouting over the music, "This man wants to come into my party, on my night, and tell me about loyalty? Look around you, Derek. The world is mine." A cheer broke out from a few intoxicated fans, not fully grasping the tension, mistaking it for a show. But to Derek, the words were poison. His fists curled at his sides. "Your world," Derek said, his voice steady but trembling with rage, "was built with me at your side. I gave you beats, I gave you years, I gave you my trust. And this," he gestured toward Samantha, his voice breaking, "this is how you repay me?" Marcus stepped closer, his voice lowering now, sharp and cold. "Don't act like a saint. You were so busy chasing dreams, you forgot the woman standing next to you. I didn't steal her, Derek. You left her wide open." Gasps spread through the crowd. Samantha's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Marcus, stop," she pleaded. But the rapper leaned closer, his words a venomous whisper only Derek could hear. "She'll never love you the way she loves me." Derek's eyes burned. His whole body trembled, not just with anger, but with the crushing weight of betrayal. His best friend, his brother, was tearing him down piece by piece, and doing it in front of the world. "Say it again," Derek hissed through clenched teeth. Marcus smirked. "She'll never." That was the breaking point. Derek shoved Marcus backward, sending gasps and screams rippling through the room. The rapper stumbled but laughed bitterly, adjusting his blazer. "What are you going to do, Derek? Hit me?" In front of everyone. Security began to move closer, sensing the danger. Partygoers pulled out their phones, the glow of screens capturing every second. Samantha rushed forward, grabbing Derek's arm. "Please, let's just go. We can leave. Don't do this." Her eyes begged him, desperate to save what was left. But Derek was lost in the storm. His mind replayed every memory, childhood dreams with Marcus, vows exchanged with Samantha, the years of loyalty and love now shattered. All he saw was betrayal standing before him, grinning like the devil. Marcus took a step closer, his voice dripping with contempt. "Face it, Derek. You were never man enough for her. Or for this world." The words cut deeper than any blade. Derek's hand slipped into his jacket, his fingers brushing against cold steel. The crowd gasped as the glint of the gun appeared, the air sucked out of the room in an instant. Screams erupted. People scattered, ducking behind tables, rushing for the exits. Security shouted, but no one dared step too close. Marcus froze, the smirk finally fading, replaced by shock. "You wouldn't," he whispered, though doubt clouded his eyes. Derek's hand shook as he raised the gun, his voice breaking, raw with grief and fury. "You took everything from me. My wife, my brother, my life." Samantha screamed, throwing herself between them, her hands outstretched. "Derek, please. This isn't you." For a heartbeat, time seemed to stop. The music still thumped faintly in the background, out of place against the chaos. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Derek's eyes brimmed with tears. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You already killed me before I ever pulled this trigger." And with that, the line between justice and vengeance vanished forever. The world seemed to pause, every sound muted except the pounding of Derek's heart. His arm trembled as he aimed the gun, his finger resting on the trigger. Samantha sobbed in front of him, her hands stretched wide, desperate to stop the inevitable. "Derek, please," she cried, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. You can still walk away. Please, for us, for who you are, don't let this destroy you." For a flicker of a moment, her words reached him. He blinked, his hand lowering slightly. He saw her face through the blur of tears, the woman he'd once loved with every part of himself, the life they had built. But then Marcus spoke. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. Walk away? He's got nothing to walk back to. Marcus's lip curled in a bitter sneer. You've already lost her, Derek. She's mine. The words shattered what little restraint Derek had left. The rage inside him, the humiliation, the betrayal, it all erupted in a single, deafening bang. The gun fired. The sound split the air, louder than the music, louder than the screams that followed. Marcus staggered back, eyes wide in disbelief. For a second, he looked almost confused, as though he couldn't believe anyone dared touch him. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, his white blazer blooming red where the bullet had struck his chest. Chaos exploded. Guests screamed, ducking behind tables, phones clattering to the floor as people fled toward the exits. Security rushed forward, shouting, but the damage was already done. The superstar, Marcus "Lyric" Johnson, lay on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. Samantha fell to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound, sobbing uncontrollably. No, please. Stay with me. Marcus, don't you dare leave me. Her hands were slick with blood, her screams piercing through the chaos. Marcus's lips moved, a weak whisper slipping out. He actually did it. His eyes glazed over as his chest rose and fell one final time. The arrogance, the swagger, the untouchable persona, it all vanished in an instant. Derek stood frozen, the gun still in his hand, his face pale. The room around him blurred, voices blending into one meaningless roar. All he could see was Marcus's lifeless body on the floor, Samantha's cries echoing in his ears. He whispered to himself, his voice hollow. You made me do this. Security swarmed him, shouting commands, but Derek didn't resist. He let the gun slip from his fingers, clattering onto the floor. His arms went limp as officers forced him to the ground, cuffing his wrists behind his back. Cameras flashed, phones recorded. The murder of a superstar, captured from every angle. In seconds, the story of betrayal and blood would spread across the world. As they dragged Derek to his feet, Samantha looked up from Marcus's body, her face streaked with tears and blood. Her eyes locked on Derek's, filled with rage, sorrow, and something even darker, blame. You killed him, she screamed. You killed him. Derek's face twisted with pain. No, he rasped. You both killed me long before this night. The police shoved him forward, leading him out through the flashing lights of the paparazzi who had already gathered outside. Reporters shouted questions, the crowd screamed, but Derek barely heard them. His mind was trapped in that one moment. The sound of the gun, the look on Marcus's face, the sight of Samantha cradling him in her arms. Inside the venue, the party was over. The music had stopped. All that remained was the body of a man who thought he was invincible, lying lifeless in a pool of blood, and the echo of a gunshot that had destroyed 3 lives in an instant. As officers dragged Derek through the back hallway of the venue, away from the screaming crowd and flashing phones, his body felt heavy, almost numb. The gunshot still echoed in his ears, looping like a cruel soundtrack he could not silence. His wrists burned against the cuffs, but the real pain came from within. For a fleeting second, he remembered the very first day he and Marcus recorded together, 2 kids in a damp basement with nothing but a microphone and a dream. Marcus had rapped, Derek had laid down the beat, and they had laughed like brothers certain the world would one day know their names. That memory now felt poisoned, like an old photograph stained with blood. Why did it have to end like this? Derek whispered to himself, barely audible. The officer beside him shot him a puzzled glance, but said nothing. Every step down the hallway replayed pieces of his life. Samantha's laughter on their wedding day. Marcus's promise, we're gonna rise together, D. You and me against the world. And now, Samantha sobbing over Marcus's body, screaming words that cut deeper than the handcuffs digging into his skin. You killed him. In Derek's mind, a bitter truth clawed its way forward. He had lost them both long before the bullet was fired. Trust had died first, then love, and finally, Marcus himself. He closed his eyes, swallowing the ache in his throat. They think the bullet killed him, he muttered under his breath. But it killed me too. I just happened to still be breathing. The officers shoved him into the back of the squad car, the door slamming shut. For the first time in his life, Derek felt utterly alone, stripped not just of freedom, but of the two people who had defined his world. The sirens wailed as the car pulled away. Outside, fans wept and shouted Marcus's name. But inside the vehicle, only silence remained. The silence of a man who had destroyed everything he loved in one irreversible act. The flashing red and blue lights painted the street outside the venue like a crime scene in a movie. Crowds had gathered behind police tape, cell phones raised high, eager to capture the chaos unfolding before them. What had begun as a night of music and glamour had ended in blood, and the world wanted every detail. Derek Carter was led out of the building in handcuffs, his head bowed, his jacket stained with the fingerprints of police. The cameras exploded with light, reporters shouting questions over one another. Why did you shoot him, Derek? Was this about your wife? Do you have anything to say to Marcus's fans? But Derek said nothing. His face was pale, eyes hollow, as if his soul had already left him. Each flash of the cameras only deepened the shadows on his face, capturing forever the image of the man who had killed a superstar. Inside the venue, paramedics carried Marcus's lifeless body away on a stretcher, a white sheet covering him. His diamond chain glimmered faintly from underneath, a haunting reminder that fame cannot shield anyone from mortality. Samantha followed close behind, her face streaked with tears, her hands still stained with blood. She sobbed uncontrollably, screaming Marcus's name as officers tried to guide her out. To the public eye, she looked like a grieving widow, though the truth was far more complicated. By midnight, the headlines had already gone global. Superstar rapper Lyric shot dead at Los Angeles party. Producer and friend arrested in cold-blooded murder. The internet erupted. Fans posted clips of the confrontation that had been live-streamed by dozens of partygoers. The world watched in horror as Marcus's final moments played out in shaky cell phone footage. The smirk, the gun, the fatal collapse. Millions mourned, but millions also judged. Why would Derek kill him like that? One post read. Another countered. He was betrayed by his best friend and his wife. How much can a man take? The murder wasn't just a crime. It was a spectacle, a story of betrayal and passion that had the nation hooked. In the holding cell that night, Derek sat on the narrow cot, staring at the floor. The adrenaline had drained, leaving only emptiness. The silence pressed down on him until it felt suffocating. He could still hear the gunshot, still see Marcus's face as the life drained out of it. A guard brought him water, but Derek barely touched it. Instead, he whispered to himself, almost like a prayer, "They killed me before I killed him." At home, Samantha sat alone in the dark, replaying the night in her mind. Her world had collapsed in the span of seconds. She had thought she could keep both men, live in the comfort of her husband's loyalty and the thrill of Marcus's passion. But now one was dead, and the other was facing life in prison. And she was the reason behind it all. Her phone buzzed endlessly with messages, some sympathetic, many vicious. "Homewrecker, you ruined them both. This is on you." She shut it off, sinking into the silence, sobs shaking her body. Samantha sat curled on the living room floor, the lights off, the silence deafening. The scent of Marcus's cologne still clung faintly to her skin, and with it came a wave of shame, so strong, she thought it might suffocate her. She pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block out the voices, not from outside, but from within. "You ruined them both. This is on you. Wife, lover, murderer." The words played like a cruel chorus in her mind. Her gaze drifted toward a framed photo on the wall, her wedding day with Derek. He had been smiling, full of hope, his arm around her as though nothing in the world could come between them. Now that same man sat in a cell, his life shattered, and she was the crack that let the destruction in. She thought of Marcus too. The thrill in his eyes, the confidence in his voice when he said no one would ever know. For a time, he made her feel seen again, wanted in a way she hadn't felt in years. But lying here now, she couldn't untangle love from selfishness, desire from destruction. Her hands trembled as she whispered into the dark, "I never meant for this. I never meant for anyone to die." But the truth was unavoidable. Her choices had sparked the fire. Marcus's arrogance had fanned the flames. Derek's rage had pulled the trigger. And now the ashes were all hers to carry. For the first time, she wished the world would forget her name. She wished she could erase herself from the story. But deep down, Samantha knew her punishment wasn't prison or exile. It was to keep breathing, haunted forever by two men's ghosts. The city didn't sleep that night. Radio stations broke their playlists to honor Marcus's legacy. News anchors replayed footage of his concerts, his interviews, his triumphs. They called him a fallen star, a legend gone too soon. Few mentioned the darker truth, that his choices had ignited the fire that consumed him. Across the city, vigils sprang up overnight. Fans gathered with candles, blasting Marcus's music from speakers, their voices breaking as they sang along to the lyrics that had once inspired them. Mourners painted murals on brick walls, larger-than-life portraits of Lyric, crowned with halos and angel wings. To them, Marcus was immortal now, a martyr of the culture. But not everyone lit candles. Some took to the internet with fury, turning their grief into blame. Hashtags trended by the hour. Hashtag justice for Lyric, hashtag pray for Derek, and the more venomous hashtag cancel Samantha. Social media became a battleground. One side painting Marcus as a legend cut down too soon, the other pointing to the affair as proof of his hypocrisy. On a late-night talk show, a commentator declared, "We lost a star, yes, but we also lost sight of the truth. Fame doesn't excuse betrayal. Fame doesn't erase responsibility." Another panelist pushed back. This wasn't about music or celebrity. This was a man betrayed by the two people closest to him. Derek Carter didn't just snap out of nowhere. He was broken. Clips of the argument went viral, fueling the divide. Some fans demanded Derek face life in prison, calling him jealous, violent, a murderer. Others flooded forums, insisting they understood his pain, that betrayal could push any man to the edge. And in the middle of it all was Samantha, her face plastered across tabloids under headlines like "The Woman Between Two Men" and "The Affair That Killed a Legend." She was no longer a wife or a lover in the public's eyes. She was the villain of the story, the spark that lit the match. The tragedy was no longer just a private betrayal. It had become a national debate, a mirror of the culture itself. People weren't just asking who pulled the trigger. They were asking who truly bore the blame. And in the corner of every broadcast was the same haunting image. Derek Carter, once the loyal friend, now the man who had pulled the trigger. The bullet had ended one life, but in truth, it had destroyed three. The trial of Derek Carter was more than a legal proceeding. It was a national event. Weeks after the shooting, people still lined up outside the courthouse each morning, clutching posters of Marcus, Lyric, Johnson, chanting for justice. Television crews camped on the steps. Headlines screamed every development, every whispered rumor. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The courtroom overflowed with spectators, reporters, and grieving fans. Samantha sat in the gallery, pale and gaunt, her once elegant frame hollowed by sleepless nights. She couldn't bring herself to look at Derek, not after everything, not after watching Marcus's life spill out onto the floor. The prosecutor's voice rang out with sharp authority. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was not self-defense. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act, a cold-blooded murder committed out of jealousy and rage." Derek Carter pointed a gun at his closest friend and pulled the trigger. And for that, he must be held accountable. The jury nodded solemnly, eyes flicking toward Derek, who sat at the defense table in a wrinkled suit, his face drawn and weary. The cameras caught every twitch of his hands, every glance toward Samantha, every sigh. But the defense attorney told a different story. He stood tall, his voice steady, appealing not only to the jury but to the humanity in every heart listening. Derek Carter is not a monster. He is a man who gave everything to his friend, his loyalty, his talent, his years of hard work. And what did he receive in return? Betrayal. His wife and his brother in music tore his world apart. On that night, Derek wasn't just facing a man who betrayed him. He was facing the living embodiment of his broken heart. He snapped. And yes, he made a tragic choice. But I ask you, who among us could endure such humiliation and walk away unscathed? The room was silent, every word landing like a heavy stone. Samantha was called to testify. Her hands shook as she swore the oath, her voice trembling when she spoke. "Marcus and I, we made a mistake. I never wanted it to go this far. I never thought." She trailed off, choking back tears. Derek wasn't a violent man. He loved me. He loved Marcus too. Until that night. Her words cut through Derek like glass. He lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. When it was his turn to speak, Derek rose slowly. The courtroom hushed. His voice was raw, stripped of all pretense. I stand here not to excuse what I did, but to tell you who I was before that night. I was a husband. I was a friend. I believed in loyalty more than anything. And then I learned that the two people I trusted most had betrayed me. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. When I pulled that trigger, it wasn't out of hate. It was out of despair. But I know one thing. The man I was died long before Marcus did. I killed him when I let the betrayal consume me. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gallery. Even the judge's stern face softened for a moment. Derek's confession didn't erase the crime, but it laid bare the depth of his pain, the tragedy of a man who lost everything in one brutal moment. As the gavel struck to end the day's session, the question hung heavy in the air. Would the jury see Derek as a cold-blooded killer or as a broken man crushed by betrayal? The final day of the trial dawned gray and heavy, as though the skies themselves understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. Crowds once again gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read "Justice for Lyric" and "No Excuse for Murder." News vans lined the block, their cameras trained on the courthouse doors, ready to beam the verdict across the world. Inside, the courtroom was hushed. The jurors filed back in after hours of deliberation, their faces solemn. Everyone held their breath, Samantha in the gallery, trembling in her seat. Derek at the defense table, his hands folded, eyes red but steady. The judge cleared his throat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. We have, Your Honor. He unfolded a slip of paper, his voice steady as he read aloud. We, the jury, find the defendant, Derek Carter, guilty of voluntary manslaughter. A ripple of sound filled the room. Gasps, murmurs, cries. Samantha covered her mouth, tears streaming. Derek closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down his cheek. He had expected the word murder, had braced himself for life in prison. But the jury had seen something else, not a cold-blooded killer, but a broken man driven to the edge. The judge's gavel struck. Mr. Carter, you are hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison. The weight of those words settled over the courtroom like a stone. 25 years. A lifetime, and yet not a death sentence. For Derek, it meant decades behind bars, stripped of freedom, haunted by the memory of the night he pulled the trigger. As deputies led him away, he glanced once more toward Samantha. Her eyes met his, filled with sorrow, guilt, and an ache that words could never capture. She mouthed, I'm sorry. He gave the faintest nod before disappearing through the side door, chains clinking with each step. Outside, the media frenzy erupted. Reporters shouted into microphones, fans wailed in grief, and pundits debated what the verdict meant. Some said justice had been served. Others argued Derek deserved more mercy. The world dissected every angle, but for those closest, no verdict could undo the devastation. Marcus Lyric Johnson was buried in a lavish ceremony attended by celebrities, fans, and family. His song shot back to the top of the charts, his image plastered across murals and tributes. To the world, he was a legend gone too soon. But beneath the adoration lay whispers of the scandal, of the affair that had sparked it all, of the arrogance that cost him his life. His legacy was bright, but stained. Samantha faded from the spotlight, unable to escape the shame. She carried the weight of two men's destruction, one buried in the ground, the other locked behind bars. Her name became a curse online, her face plastered on tabloids. She withdrew from the world, living quietly, a ghost of the woman she once was. And Derek, behind prison walls, became a shadow of himself. In letters to his family, he wrote of regret, not only for taking Marcus's life, but for letting rage consume him. The gun didn't just kill him, he wrote once. It killed me too. I'm just walking out the years of a ghost. In the end, the story was not just about a rapper's death or a man's downfall. It was about how betrayal can rot the foundations of trust, how passion and pride can destroy lives, and how one bullet can ripple through countless hearts. The verdict closed the case, but it could never close the wound. Fans still play Marcus's songs. Derek still counts the days behind bars, and Samantha still wakes in the night, haunted by screams and a gunshot that changed everything. True crime has no heroes, only lessons carved from tragedy. And the lesson here was clear. Fame, loyalty, love, when twisted by betrayal, They can all lead to ruin.